It started with a call that didn't make sense. A young woman dialed 911, her voice shaking, barely holding together. She said she thought someone was inside her house. But when officers arrived just minutes later, the doors were locked, the lights were off, and she was gone. No signs of a struggle. No broken windows. No noise. Just silence. And a phone left behind on the kitchen floor, still connected to the call. For the next 72 hours, no one knew where she was or what really happened inside that house. And when investigators finally uncovered the truth, it wasn't just shocking. It was something they never saw coming. This is a case that shook an entire community. A disappearance that, at first glance, looked like a random act, but slowly unraveled into something much darker, something personal, something planned. And the deeper you go into this story, the more unsettling it becomes. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person is the one you least expect. This all began in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside a mid-sized American city. The kind of place where people leave their porch lights on at night, where neighbors wave when they pass by, where nothing like this is supposed to happen. The woman at the center of this story was 8-year-old Emily Carter. She worked as a dental hygienist, lived alone, and by all accounts, had a routine life. She wasn't someone who attracted attention. No history of trouble, no dangerous relationships, just a normal life. Emily had moved into the neighborhood about a year earlier. She kept mostly to herself but was friendly when spoken to. She had a small circle of close friends, a steady job, and a daily routine that rarely changed. Every morning, she'd leave for work around 8:15. Every evening, she'd return home before sunset. Weekends were usually quiet. Grocery runs, laundry, maybe dinner with a friend. Nothing unusual, until the night she disappeared. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7:40 p.m. Emily's neighbor, a man who lived across the street, later told police he saw her pull into her driveway. She got out of her car, carrying what looked like a takeout bag. She waved briefly, like she always did, then went inside. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. At 8:12 p.m., the 911 call came in. Dispatch records show that Emily sounded frightened, but not panicked at first. She told the operator she thought she heard footsteps upstairs. The operator asked if anyone else was supposed to be in the house. Emily said no. Then there was a pause. The operator kept asking questions, asking her to move to a safe place, asking if she could lock herself in a room. But then something changed. Emily's voice dropped, almost like she was whispering. She said, I think someone's here. Then there was a noise, a sudden, sharp sound, like something hitting the floor, and the call ended. Officers were dispatched immediately. Response time was under 6 minutes. When they arrived, nothing looked out of place. The front door was closed. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No alarms triggered. They knocked. No answer. They entered the home. Inside, everything seemed normal. The living room lights were on. The TV was off. The takeout bag was sitting on the kitchen counter, unopened. And then they saw the phone, lying face down on the kitchen floor, still connected to the 911 call. But Emily was nowhere in the house. Officers cleared every room, closets, bathroom, basement, even the attic. Nothing. No sign of a struggle. No blood. No indication that anything violent had happened. It was as if she had simply vanished. Within an hour, the case escalated. Detectives were called in. The area was secured. Neighbors were interviewed. And that's when the timeline started to take shape. The neighbor across the street confirmed seeing Emily arrive home. Another neighbor said they didn't notice anything unusual. No screams. No suspicious vehicles. No strangers. Everything pointed to a very small window of time. From the moment Emily walked into her house to the moment that 911 call ended, less than 30 minutes had passed. And in that time, something happened that made her disappear without a trace. Police began processing the scene. They dusted for fingerprints, checked doors and windows, collected the phone, reviewed the call recording. Nothing obvious stood out. There were no unknown prints, no forced entry, no missing valuables, which led investigators to a troubling possibility. Whoever was inside that house may have been someone Emily knew. As the hours turned into the first full day, the case gained attention. Missing posters went up. Local news stations picked up the story. Her friends and family began speaking out, asking for help, begging for answers. But there were none. Not yet. Detectives shifted focus to Emily's personal life. They spoke with her co-workers, friends, family members. Everyone described her the same way. Responsible, kind, predictable. No recent arguments, no known enemies, no signs that she felt threatened. But one detail stood out. A co-worker mentioned that Emily had seemed distracted in the days leading up to her disappearance. Not scared, just off. When asked to explain, the co-worker said Emily had been checking her phone more than usual, sometimes stepping away to take calls. Once or twice, she looked upset, but brushed it off when asked. At first, it didn't seem like much. But in cases like this, small details matter. Investigators obtained Emily's phone records, and that's when things started to get interesting. There was one number that appeared repeatedly in the days before she vanished. Multiple calls, some lasting only a few minutes, others longer. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, and it didn't belong to any of her known friends or family. Detectives tracked it down. It was a prepaid phone, unregistered. No name, no address, just a number. That discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was Emily in contact with someone using a burner phone? And more importantly, who was on the other end? As the investigation moved into the second day, pressure began to build. The community was on edge. News coverage intensified. People started speculating. Was this a random abduction? A targeted attack? Or something else entirely? Search teams were organized. Volunteers combed through nearby woods, parks, and empty lots. Nothing. No trace of Emily. Back at the house, forensic teams continued their work. And then, late into the second night, they found something. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't dramatic. But it changed everything. On the hardwood floor near the staircase, there was a faint mark, barely visible. At first glance, it looked like a smudge. But under proper lighting, it became clear. It was a partial footprint, not Emily's, and not from any of the responding officers. It was from a shoe, one that didn't match anything in her home, and it was facing one direction, upstairs. That single detail shifted the entire focus of the investigation. Because now, it wasn't just about someone being inside the house. It was about where they went and what they were doing there. Detectives went back upstairs. This time, more carefully, more methodically. They re-examined every room, every surface, every inch. And in the bedroom, they noticed something subtle. One of the drawers in her dresser was slightly open. Inside, everything looked normal at first. Clothes neatly folded, nothing missing. But tucked underneath was an envelope, plain, unmarked. And inside it was something no one expected to find. Something that would completely change the direction of the case. Something that suggested this wasn't random at all. And that Emily Carter may have been hiding something. Something dangerous. Something that, if true, meant those 72 hours were only the beginning. Inside that envelope, there was no letter, no explanation, just photographs, several of them, all printed, all recent, and all of the same man. At first glance, he didn't look unusual. Mid-30s, dark hair, average build, the kind of face you wouldn't notice in a crowd. But the way the photos were taken, that was different. They weren't posed. They weren't social media pictures. These were taken from a distance. Some from across a parking lot. Some from inside a car. One even looked like it was taken through a window. Every image felt deliberate, like someone had been watching him or documenting him. Detectives laid the photos out carefully, studying each one, trying to find a pattern, a location, anything that could identify who this man was. And then they noticed something else. On the back of one of the photos, there was a date, just 3 days before Emily disappeared, which meant one thing. Whatever this was, it was recent, very recent. The question now wasn't just who this man was. It was why Emily had these photos in the first place. Because this didn't look like fear. It looked like surveillance. And that changed everything. Investigators immediately shifted focus. They ran the man's face through databases, facial recognition, local records, DMV images. Nothing. No match. It was like he didn't exist. But someone had taken those photos. And that someone was likely Emily, which raised an even darker possibility. Was she being followed? Or was she the one doing the following? As day 3 began, the pressure reached a breaking point. 72 hours. That window investigators always talk about. The one where chances of finding someone alive start to drop. Time was running out. Detectives went back to Emily's digital life. This time, they went deeper. Emails, social media, deleted messages, cloud backups. And finally, they found something. A hidden folder, buried inside her laptop, encrypted. It took hours to break into it. But when they did, the case took another sharp turn. Inside were dozens of files, notes, screenshots, more photos, and one document that stood out immediately. It was a timeline, detailed, organized, precise, dates, times, locations, all centered around the same man from the photographs. Emily had been tracking him for weeks, maybe longer. There were notes describing his movements, where he worked, where he parked, what time he left his apartment. She even had a rough sketch of his daily routine. This wasn't random curiosity. This was an investigation. But why? Emily wasn't a journalist. She wasn't in law enforcement. She had no known reason to be doing something like this. Unless she believed this man had done something serious enough to risk everything. Detectives dug deeper into the files. And then they found it. A single line in her notes. Short, direct, chilling. I know what you did. No name attached, no explanation. Just that sentence. And suddenly, the case wasn't just about a missing person. It was about motive. Because if Emily had uncovered something dangerous, then her disappearance might not have been random at all. It might have been the result of getting too close to the truth. Investigators worked quickly. They went back to the photos, enhanced them, zoomed in on backgrounds, reflections, street signs, and finally, they got a break. In one image, behind the man, there was a storefront, partially visible, but clear enough. They identified the location, a small strip mall about 20 minutes from Emily's house. Surveillance cameras in the area were pulled, hours of footage reviewed, and there he was, the same man, walking into a store, clear shot of his face, clear timestamp. Finally, something solid. From there, detectives tracked his movements. License plate readers picked up a vehicle matching his description. That led to an address, an apartment complex on the edge of the city. By now, it was late on the 3rd day, 72 hours since Emily vanished. And for the first time, they had a person of interest. Officers moved in carefully. No sirens, no lights. They didn't know what they were dealing with. They just knew time was critical. They knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. So they made the call. Forced entry. Inside, the apartment was dark, quiet, but not empty. The place looked lived in. Recently. Shoes by the door. A jacket on the chair. Dishes in the sink. But the man from the photos was nowhere to be found. Officers began clearing the rooms. Bedroom, bathroom, closet, nothing, until they reached the back of the apartment. A door, locked. Not unusual, but something about it felt different. There were scratches around the handle, fresh ones, like it had been opened and closed repeatedly. One of the officers tried the knob. It didn't budge. They forced it open. And what they found inside wasn't what they expected. It wasn't a storage room. It wasn't a closet. It was something else entirely. The walls were covered. Photos, dozens of them, not of random people, not of strangers, but of Emily. Different angles, different days, different locations, walking to her car, leaving work, standing outside her house. Some taken from a distance, some uncomfortably close. And suddenly, the entire narrative flipped, because Emily hadn't just been watching him. He had been watching her for a long time, maybe longer than she realized. On a small desk in the corner, there was a laptop, still on, still running. Detectives approached it carefully. On the screen was a paused video, security footage from inside Emily's house, dated the night she disappeared. The room went silent, because now they weren't just looking at a suspect. They were looking at someone who had been inside her home before that 911 call, before she vanished. And whatever happened next was likely captured on that screen. One of the detectives pressed play, and what they saw would become the most critical piece of evidence in the entire case. It started normally. Emily entering the house, setting her bag down, turning on the light. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, until a shadow moved in the background, upstairs, just for a second, but it was there, and Emily hadn't noticed it. Not yet. She walked into the kitchen, put the takeout on the counter, reached for her phone, and then she froze because she heard something. The same moment that would later lead to that 911 call. The same moment that changed everything. But this time, detectives were seeing it from a different angle. And what they were about to witness was something no one could have predicted. Emily stood still in the kitchen, her back slightly tense, her head tilted just enough to catch the sound again. A soft creak. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Someone was upstairs. You can see it in the way she slowly turns, the way her body shifts from relaxed to alert. She doesn't panic right away. Not yet. At this point, she's still trying to convince herself it's nothing. Maybe the house settling. Maybe something fell. But deep down, she knows. She reaches for her phone. That's when the 911 call begins. The footage doesn't have audio, but investigators had already heard the call. Now, they were watching it unfold in real time. Emily walks slowly toward the hallway, phone pressed to her ear. She glances up the staircase, hesitates, then takes a step back. Smart, careful. She's listening, waiting. Then, another sound, this time louder, a distinct footstep, and everything changes. You can see it instantly. Her posture stiffens, her breathing quickens. She says something into the phone, probably telling the operator what she just heard. And then, she starts backing away, toward the kitchen, toward the back of the house, like she's trying to create distance, buy time, stay out of sight. Upstairs, there's movement again. A shadow passes across the wall. Slow, controlled, not rushed, not chaotic. Whoever is up there knows exactly what they're doing. Emily looks toward the front door. For a split second, it seems like she might run, but she doesn't. And that decision becomes critical, because instead of leaving, she turns and heads toward the staircase. It doesn't make sense at first. Why would she move closer? Why go toward the danger? But then investigators notice something small, something easy to miss. As she steps toward the stairs, she picks something up from the counter, a small object, barely visible. But when the footage is enhanced, it becomes clear. It's not random. It's one of the photos, the same photos found in the envelope upstairs. The man. She's holding his picture, which means in that moment, Emily knew exactly who was in her house. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't confusion. This was recognition. And everything about her behavior starts to make more sense. She wasn't running. She was confronting. Step by step, she moves closer to the staircase. Slow, controlled. Her fear is still there, but now it's mixed with something else. Determination. She says something into the phone again, likely giving details, maybe even saying his name. But then, everything escalates. A figure appears at the top of the stairs, partially visible, just enough to confirm it. It's him, the man from the photos. He doesn't rush down. He doesn't speak. He just stands there, watching her for a few seconds. Neither of them moves. It's a standoff, silent, heavy, and then he takes one step forward. Emily flinches. Her grip tightens on the phone. You can almost feel her heartbeat through the screen. She backs up slightly, says something louder now. This is probably when her voice drops in the 911 call, when the operator hears the shift, when she says, I think someone's here. Because now, it's not a question anymore. It's real. He starts walking down the stairs, slowly, deliberately, not hiding, not rushing, like he wants her to see him, like this moment has been planned. Emily turns, looks toward the kitchen again, maybe calculating, maybe thinking about escaping through the back door, but she hesitates, and that hesitation costs her, because in that split second, he closes the distance. Faster than expected, much faster. He moves off the stairs and into the frame, now fully visible. Same face, same build, same man from every photo. And suddenly, the controlled tension breaks. Emily stumbles backward. The phone slips slightly in her hand. This is the moment investigators heard on the call. That sharp noise, something hitting the floor. Now, they can see it. It's the phone. It drops, slides across the kitchen floor. Camera angle shifts slightly as it settles. Still recording, still capturing everything. But now, the view is lower, more chaotic, partial. Emily is off to the side. The man moves toward her. Fast now. No more hesitation. No more slow steps. Whatever control he had, it's gone. Emily tries to move, tries to get past him. There's a struggle. Quick, violent, unclear. They move out of frame for a second. All you can see is motion, shadows, a chair tipping over. Then, silence, stillness. A few seconds pass, too quiet, too still. And then, he re-enters the frame, alone, breathing heavily, looking down at something off camera. At Emily, you don't see her clearly, just part of her arm, motionless. He runs a hand through his hair. Pas once, twice, like he's thinking, deciding. And then he looks directly at the camera. That's the moment that chills everyone who watches this footage. Because it means one thing. He knew it was there. He knew he was being recorded, and he didn't stop. He walks over, leans down. The screen goes dark. But the recording doesn't end. Audio continues for a few more seconds. Footsteps. A dragging sound. Then nothing. When investigators reviewed that footage, the room went silent. Because this wasn't just evidence of a crime. This was a timeline, a clear sequence of events. And, more importantly, it confirmed something critical. Emily didn't disappear randomly. She was targeted. But the biggest question still remained. Why? Why her? Why had this man been watching her? And more importantly, what had she discovered that made her confront him instead of running? As detectives went back through her files, her notes, her timeline, one detail started to stand out more than anything else. Something they hadn't fully understood before. A pattern. The dates she had written down. The locations she had marked. They weren't random. They matched something else. Something already in police records. Unsolved cases. Disappearances. All within a 50-mile radius. All over the past 2 years. Different victims. Different circumstances. But similar in one specific way. No forced entry. No clear suspect. And no trace of the victims afterward. Emily hadn't just been tracking a man. She had been building a case. A connection no one else had seen. And if she was right, then the man in that video wasn't just responsible for her disappearance. He had done this before, multiple times, which meant Emily Carter didn't just find a secret. She uncovered something much bigger, something far more dangerous. And that realization changed the entire investigation overnight. By the time investigators connected those dates to the unsolved cases, everything shifted from a missing person investigation to something much bigger, something far more disturbing. Emily hadn't just crossed paths with the wrong person. She had been tracking a predator. And not just any predator. Someone methodical, patient, and experienced. The kind of person who doesn't leave mistakes behind. Until now. Because Emily had made him visible. Every note she wrote, every photo she took, every pattern she documented, it was all starting to line up. And for the first time, investigators weren't just reacting to a crime. They were stepping into a timeline that had been building for years. Detectives reopened the older cases. Side by side, they compared everything. Victim profiles, location, times. At first, the connections were subtle, easy to miss. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Each victim had a routine, a predictable pattern. Work, home, repetition. Just like Emily, each disappearance happened within a narrow time frame. Early evening, just after returning home. And in every single case, there were reports, small ones, about someone unfamiliar being seen in the area days before. A man, standing near a parking lot, sitting in a car, watching. At the time, those details meant nothing. Now, they meant everything. Because Emily had done what no one else had. She paid attention. She followed the pattern. And she got close enough to identify him. Too close. With the footage from the apartment, investigators were able to extract clear images of his face. This time, they widened the search. Not just local databases, national. And finally, they got a hit. His name was Daniel Reeves. Surventre. No major criminal record. No violent history. At least, not officially. He worked contract jobs. Moved frequently, rarely stayed in one place long enough to draw attention. On paper, he was invisible. But the deeper they dug, the more unsettling it became. There were gaps in his history, periods where he seemed to disappear, months at a time, with no employment records, no fixed address, and those gaps lined up almost perfectly with the dates of the other disappearances. Now they had a name, Afasi, and a pattern. But they still didn't have him. A warrant was issued immediately. Statewide alert. Then nationwide. Airports. Bus station. Highways. Every possible exit point was flagged. But people like Daniel don't panic. They plan. And by the time police were looking for him, he was already gone. What they did have was his apartment. And inside it, more evidence than anyone expected. Hidden compartments, storage boxes, digital files, items that didn't belong to him, personal belongings from different people, different women, jewelry, clothing, small things, but enough. Enough to confirm what Emily had suspected, and enough to reopen every one of those cold cases. But there was one question that still hung over everything. Where was Emily? The footage showed the attack, the struggle, but not what happened after. Search teams expanded their radius. Day and night. Helicopters. 9 units. Volunteers. They followed every lead. Every possible location tied to Daniel's past. Abandoned buildings. Old job sites. Places he had stayed briefly. And then, on the 5th day, they found something. About 30 miles outside the city, near a wooded area, not far from a road Daniel had used multiple times based on traffic camera data. It was a shallow, concealed space. Easy to miss, but not invisible. Not anymore. Because this time, investigators knew where to look, and that made all the difference. What they found there confirmed the worst. Emily Carter didn't survive, but her story didn't end there. Because what she left behind changed everything. Her notes, her timeline, her evidence. It became the foundation of the case against Daniel Reeves. A case that would grow far beyond one victim. Weeks later, he was finally caught. Hundreds of miles away, living under a different name, trying to start over, like nothing had happened. But this time, he didn't get away. The evidence was overwhelming. The footage, the photos, the items recovered from his apartment, and most importantly, Emily's work. In court, prosecutors laid it all out. Not just what he did to her, but what he had been doing for years. Case after case, victim after victim, patterns that had gone unnoticed. Until one person decided to look closer. The trial lasted weeks. Every detail was examined, every moment replayed. And when the verdict came in, it wasn't a surprise. Guilty, on all counts, multiple life sentences, no chance of release. For the families of the victims, it brought some form of closure, answers they had waited years for. But for many, it also raised a haunting question. How many more cases like this are still out there? How many patterns go unnoticed because no one connects the dots? Emily Carter wasn't a detective. She wasn't trained for this. She didn't have resources, but she had something else. She paid attention. She asked questions, and she refused to ignore what didn't make sense. And in doing that, she exposed something no one else had seen, even though it cost her everything. Some stories end with justice. Others end with lessons. This one leaves you with both. Because the truth is, danger doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it blends in. Sometimes it watches quietly, waiting until someone notices. If you made it this far, I want to know what you think. Do you believe this could have been stopped sooner? Or was it only a matter of time before someone like Emily uncovered the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real stories like this, stories that make you think, that stay with you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next story might be even more unbelievable